Good morning and welcome everyone. I'm Kimberly Chalia with PHCA. Thank you for joining us for today's session. This will be part 2, Managing the Business of People, presented by Barbara Speedling, Quality of Life Specialist. Welcome back, Barbara.
Thank you so much.
A few quick updates to share before we get started. If you were not part of the part 1 session last Tuesday, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the PHCA website. The webinar has been approved for 1.5 continuing education credits for all attendees. For those who provided a NAB number, credits will be uploaded shortly. We're also sharing certificates with those in attendance, so look for those in your email. As we begin today, all attendees will be in listen-only mode. Please feel free to submit your questions via the Q&A icon on your screen, and we'll make sure to answer as many of those questions as possible at the end of today's presentation. I will turn it over to Barbara.
Thanks so much, Kimberly, and good afternoon again, everyone. So nice to see you and glad that you returned. I sure hope that last week's conversation, if you were with us, was helpful to you. And in a time when, everybody is struggling to figure out, how to entice people to join us in our mission and to stay with us once they come, we really need to look at some of those things that are common in our industry and the things that we can overcome by maybe changing our perspective or perhaps looking, differently at the things that we do and stepping back and maybe considering what has worked for others, not always trying to reinvent the wheel. I find in the years that I've been consulting that many times we overlook work that's already in place, especially if we're new to an organization and want to bring in the way that we do it. In fact, I'm working with a local organization now that recruited me to help their board to move ahead in a new direction. They're a small historical society, and every time I bring them a new idea, they listen very patiently, and then they say, well, that's not the way we do it. So keep an open mind as we talk about these things that corporate America has embraced in the way that they recruit and retain or look to retain the staff that they attract to their environments. And maybe we can take away some of those things that we overlook in healthcare because we are such a touchy-feely kind of industry. We often look for things other than good organizational skills, good, business skills, and especially in the areas of management. I find that we often overlook traditional management training, the psychology of working with other people, and something that I've dedicated most of my career to learning about, both in a practical sense and an academic way. And I've enlightened myself about even my own behavior as I've moved through these different, stages of understanding. So I hope to bring some of that to you today and to really be able to address this issue that we're all facing. And even though this article is a bit dated now from 2020, it still holds true for the way people in our industry are feeling, not just in long-term care, but in all aspects of healthcare. We're seeing an exodus of people that perhaps are seasoned and have experience in these areas of crises and, things of this nature. And we're also seeing a downsizing of the people that are coming to join us or the people that stay once they try to come and join our team. So for instance, locally, I'm hearing that people come in and they only have experience learning virtually over the last couple of years, whether they're a nurse or a nursing assistant or just about any kind of education that was offered was pretty much virtual during the height of the pandemic. So when people come in and they find out what the real job is about, when you actually have a human component to deal with, well, then they might decide that it's not what they thought it was and they're not going to stay. So a lot of what we have to do now is we have to look at why, even before the pandemic, what were the basics? Why do people not like their job? And most importantly, it's who they work for and who they work with. What are those relationships that I have at work? And secondary to that is how important is the work to who I am? How important is that work to the things that I need in my day and the things that challenge me and that actually fulfill my need to be, to be solvent and productive at work. So if I'm bored and I'm not challenged, and I don't like the people that I'm working with and for, I'm not going to hang around for long. And then there are, of course, all of these other things. And this just precedes the pandemic, this research. And I think that we, need to look back and realize that we were looking for staff in 2018 and 2019 too. This hasn't just started, but it was exacerbated by COVID, and the timing has been really detrimental to us. So in this study by Gallup that took about 10 years for them to produce, I thought it was important to look at some of the findings, the things that they determined, void of any pandemic influence, the things that we need to go back to, the things that we need to think about as we look at the people that are working with us and for us. So prior to the pandemic, only a third of the people working in any environment were engaged in their work. That's a very small percentage, and so startling when you consider that more than half were just showing up, weren't engaged at all. How many of those people do you have still in your environment now? Can we tolerate that kind of, work ethic or lack of work ethic, not really tied to the job itself or to the mission of your organization? And I always say that, pandemic or no, every organization has people who work hard and people who hardly work. And, our job is to find a balance there to make sure that we begin to look at the equality of people in their contributions to the daily, work that we do. So what makes a place inviting? And I believe I asked you this in last week's session as well. You want to go in, you want to see what the place is about. But once you get in there, what makes you decide to stay or to come back or to reinvest in the place that you've just discovered? What is it? Is it the way it looks? Is it the way it feels? Is it the way you feel when you're there, or the way the people make you feel? So what is it? And I think a lot of times, we don't look at the small things. We don't consider, we look at big things like redecorating and, the kind of furniture we buy and all of that. But really, I often say to people, you could live in a cave with nothing. But if you liked and cared for the people that you were living with in that cave, you would have a quality of life. You'd want to stay there. Maybe you'd want to change your situation at some point together, but you would want to stay with that group of people in that place, wherever that was. So this is something to talk about with your leadership team and then with your staff in general. What is it that makes us want to leave? And I did that recently with a couple of client facilities, and I got a great deal of information. It was about a lot of things. It was about, it wasn't what I expected, or it was harder than they said it would be, or, I decided that I wasn't cut out for this kind of very intimate work with people, or the job has no future. How do we make jobs interesting? How do we make them purposeful and productive in terms of someone's life? So we joke a lot about millennials, and of course we're past millennials now into Generation Zers. And we have to think about these populations of, people coming behind us now, new to the industry, new to work. What do they want out of what their job is going to offer them? And I think that they want what everybody wants, for the job to be purposeful, meaningful in their life. They want to do something that they enjoy, that, uses their skills and their strengths and gives them a chance to move on, to develop, to come up the ladder. Nobody wants to be in a nowhere kind of job. And they want a job that's going to accommodate their lifestyle. And COVID has really pronounced this now with remote education, with remote, working. And people are finding that you don't necessarily have to be in a physical place to be able to be productive. And in fact, and I have to say this about myself, some people are more productive working remotely. I find that when I can work in a very quiet environment where there's no distraction, where there's no overhead paging and people yelling in the hallway and all of that, I can get much more accomplished. So, these are the kinds of things you have to talk about with your leadership team. Where do you stand in terms of satisfaction on the basic levels? The things that we often do that hold us up in long-term care or in most industries is that we're not clear about what we expect of you and how you fit in to the day-to-day goings on here. Education and training, especially during COVID, has been lacking. People are not even doing basic orientation, fire safety. And those things are going to increase your liability tremendously. When I write a plan of correction, I often find that it happened, the bad thing happened, because somebody was supposed to have known something or supposed to have done something and they didn't. Why didn't they? Well, we didn't communicate well. We didn't enforce it. We didn't, reestablish the importance of it. None of those things. Sometimes we don't have human resources in place. We let every department head or every manager, handle their own HR kinds of documentation. Leaves you vulnerable again. So many times on a mock survey, I see such variation in what's in one person's folder. Did we get references? Did we complete the criminal history record check? All of those things, become scattered, become disorganized when you're not centralized with those kinds of things. So if you don't have order and you don't have everybody understanding what their job is, and you don't have managers that are prepared to manage well and actually understand the science of management, the psychology of it, you're going to have trouble forming teams. You're going to have trouble getting people to accept guidance and supervision and support from other people. You're going to get attitude, and again, forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but excuse me, a resident told me a number of years ago that she thought behavior, classically, was that somebody didn't get what they wanted or needed, and so they get an attitude. And I think that's true. New employees that don't feel supported tell me that they want to leave. They feel as though they were thrown into it with no guidance, no support, no resources. How are they expected to do their job? So there's a lot to be said for looking at your HR processes, looking at the way you welcome people, and maybe even wanting to consider that before you have someone go through the whole application and training process, especially in nursing, you have a seasoned staff member, a supervisory person, sit with them and describe what the real job is about. Excuse me. If you were with me last week, you know that I had a terrible coughing fit toward the end of our conversation, and I'm trying to avoid that today. So in any event, I think that it's important for your team to consider whether or not you can look at this list of things and find out, where you are in the scheme of this. Do you have a good handle on the way you bring people into your organization and the consistency of that? Beyond that, it's the relationships that we form. How I get along with my boss is important, but my boss should not cross a line and try to be my friend. Because if my boss tries to be my friend, they can't be my boss. We should also try to foster relationships between our staff members, that they get to know each other a little bit. And we'll talk more about that as we go forward. But think about the fact that once people realize that they have commonalities, whatever it might be, they went to the same high school, or they grew up in the same era, or they like the same music, or whatever, you begin to form a bond. And the only way to really bring a team together is show them how they're connected. Show them where their commonalities are around the mission that we have to accomplish together. And once you do that, and you bring the right personalities into those relationships, because sometimes you can add the wrong person to a well-functioning team and destroy the whole team. So we have to pick and choose carefully, and we can't just hire anybody to have a warm body. A lot of times in therapeutic recreation activities departments, that's what we do. We just hire anybody because we think it's easy to engage people. But really, engaging another person in a substantial way is about finding a connection. And that's not just playing, games or listening to music, that's talking. So those relationships even extend to, helping people to understand how they relate to residents, what the commonalities are there. And there are many. There are many as people. We share many commonalities of wanting happiness and control and satisfaction and money and friends, and so many places where we can draw our similarities and really build on that. So in the workplace, this study found that when you have good social relationships among the people that work there, they feel close to each other. They feel protective of each other. Think about those people who protect you during a survey. The people who say to each other, oh my goodness, you forgot your name tag? Well, let me get you something, okay. And they whisper, oh, I'll go get it. That's the kind of camaraderie, the kind of support and teamwork that we want, not just during a survey, but all the time, that we're helpful, that we're observant, that we make sure that we fill the void so that the service doesn't get, discounted in some way. So it's important that, we have this relationship with each other. If we don't have it, if you ever walk into a staff dining room amongst people who aren't happy, you can hear it all around you. Well, I was supposed to do this, but they let so-and-so, and they always do that. They play favorites. You hear the conversation. So we need to have basic needs met. Friendships are really important. If you like who you work with, you like going to work. If you like the people you work with, if you feel comfortable and welcome, you're not going to be afraid to speak up, and you're going to be able to talk about the creative ideas that you have and try new things. So basic needs have to be met. And then once we can get there, we can start to build that team as a group of people who begin to see each other, as having that same mission, that same kind of mission. So we're talking about transformational leadership, transforming an organization from a place that we just come to work to a place that we invest in. So if you are a leader who's, committed to transforming that environment, these are the things that you have in your tool bag. You have a vision. and you know that you can move forward with those opportunities that you have, and you can really achieve a culture change within your organization. You know, we throw that wording around a lot, culture change. So what is that? You know, I always go to the dictionary when I'm not really sure how to, you know, express something to my audience. And so I like this last, you know, definition here, that culture is really a set of shared standards and attitudes and values and goals and things that we do to characterize or brand who we are as a community. So again, culture, the way we're socialized, the way we interact with each other, the things that we believe in. And those things are, again, there's some real common human things that we already share, but I'm sure there are many other things, no matter where we're from or how we believe or the things we practice. There are lots of other things that we probably share. So cultural competency, being able to get along, to interact, to talk with, to care for anybody who comes in front of you. This means sometimes we have to take a hard look at our biases, and sometimes those biases are inherent in us. You know, in another conversation, I said to a group that, you know, we learn from a young age in this country through cartoons and lots of social media now, the way that we're supposed to feel about certain groups of people or the way they're depicted. Like take elderly people. They're always portrayed on television or in other kinds of, you know, print advertising as being less than, being kind of stupid or, funny, things they do, we make fun of them. Nobody really wants to see themselves as that elderly person. We do the same thing with overweight people. They're always the butt of jokes. They're always forced to make jokes about their own weight, you know, things that we know, somebody who's dealt with this most of my life, are embarrassing. But in our society, it's okay to poke fun at certain groups of people because it's just accepted that they're comical. So I think if you're really honest with yourself, you know that that's true. And maybe we do it to the extent of other things like, where you were born or the religion you practice or your skin color or whatever. But to be culturally competent overcomes all of those things and recognizes that we are similar but different, and we broaden our view of who our customers are. We also have to achieve a quality of life for everybody living and working in the environment. And what is that? You know, this article from Forbes, again, a dated, article at some point, but still makes a very valid, statement here about the fact that quality of life is really very subjective, and that it really, comes from a variety of walks of life, a variety of things that your life is made up of. And so it's a dynamic condition that responds to the things that are happening. So you might have a good quality of life until, you're in a car accident one day and everything changes overnight. And so does your quality of life. Certainly crossing the threshold of a nursing home or an assisted living or even a senior residence that forces you to downsize your belongings, your lifestyle, your choices. All of those things affect your quality of life. And how do we respond to that? How do we respond to losing certain levels of choice and autonomy and control? What does that make us feel like, and how do we react to those kinds of things? So in the corporate model, the business model, Maslow's hierarchy of need is, similar to the things that we see here in this model, where people have to have the basics met in order to feel good and comfortable in their work, and in order to really be able to move to the best incarnation of themselves. If we really want to get to a team that thinks outside the box, if you will, that is creative, that goes beyond what they know, we have to help people at every level to feel as though they belong and that they have a voice and they're being listened to. So transformational leaders, they have four basic, qualities to them. They have an influence about them, that, they consider individual perspectives and things of that nature. They inspire people, and they stimulate people to come up with ideas, to talk about things, excuse me. So as we look at each of these things, idealized influence. So you're a role model. You demonstrate the things that you want other people to, absorb about your organization, that you make good decisions, that you are someone we can respect and trust and follow. Inspirational motivation. Motivate people by your vision. A lot of times I have been, quoted as telling people that I don't come to work to make friends. In other words, I don't care if they like me or not. I say I come to make sure the people that are here for their care get what they expect and need. And so, people sometimes follow that just because they understand that that's really all it's about for me. I don't care if they like me or not, doesn't matter. I'm going to tell them the things I need to tell them and help them see a particular perspective, whether they like me or not. And so I think that lets people know that when you have a commitment to your work, that it's the work that comes first. Too often our environments become socially driven. You know, we want to belong, we want to be liked, we want to be the outspoken or the recognized one. And so I think you always have to be aware of that as the ultimate leader of an environment. And that's where the psychology comes in. You know, that's where you learn to grow with your organization and to learn that team in a way that helps you to influence them successfully. Looking at intellectual stimulation, asking people for their ideas, not just dictating, making sure that we have critical, analysis of the things that are happening through our quality assurance process, that we're looking at things all the time for performance improvement and understanding what those obstacles are. You know, most times performance improvement is interrupted because somebody left a position, somebody moved on, somebody new came who didn't understand what we were doing and they changed it all. So if you keep your team thinking all the time and on the same page and focused, you might not suffer those same kinds of things, and you can weather those transition of players from one person to another and still keep your central focus and your goals in place. And then look at being an advisor to people. You know, there's no shame in helping people to develop who they are. And I think a lot of times managers, especially managers who are in the position for the first time or maybe have come up through the ranks in their own organization, they sometimes, don't want to teach too much for fear that someone might be able to take over their position. But I would tell you that if you're really secure in your work, in your knowledge, and you want to be respected, that teaching others is one of the best ways to get that buy-in, to show your knowledge, to show how the knowledge that you have, the experience that you have, is going to benefit this person as they come up the ranks and learn their job. So I think that if you are collaborative with people, if you help them to develop and reach their goals, not only will your organization benefit, but you will as a manager through the loyalty that the person will show you. And you know what? When it comes time for them to move to the next level, which might be equal to what you do, I doubt very much that they will try to push you out of the way, but they might leave your organization to go and pursue that position in another place. And if they do, wish them well and know that you help them climb that ladder, because really in the end, those are the kinds of transitions you want to see. People who come and grow and invest in your relationship for a period of time, and then they move on and they make room for new people to come in and to grow and to keep you from becoming stagnant. When I learn that there's so much longevity in an organization, I worry, because I worry that there's no exposure to new and different thinking, to things that others are doing that are successful. We're very covetous as an industry. We don't talk a lot about what we do that works. We don't want that kind of competition. So, maybe keeping that, that flow of people and that opportunity to train and, to cultivate a better organization might be something that we invest in and that we talk about in a systemic kind of way. So transformational leaders, they really understand that it's not so much about leading, but about being able to delegate and oversee and keep their organization focused on what we want as a desired outcome, and to build those relationships and have that collective vision, support those things that we hope the community will benefit from. So I think that it's important that you're clearly defined. Years ago, everybody said we care. Everybody cares, but how much do you care and how differently do you care than the people down the street? And again, I would put to you, how would you answer the question from a prospective staff member or a prospective resident if they ask you how the quality of life in your environment is better or different than the place down the street? How would you answer that in a way that might entice them to come and stay with you? We all offer the same kind of thing. If you listen to the voicemail recordings on any, nursing home or assisted living, answering service, they all say the same thing. They have activities, they have food, they have rehab. Well, what makes you different or better? Maybe you have something that the others don't have, but you don't know how to promote it. Other things that transformational leaders do, they inspire people by sharing a vision with them, having people to, really contribute to what that vision should be. So I ask a lot of times of my client facilities if they could live in the environment that they work in successfully, and not just for a week, and not just for a month, but for the duration. Could they be cared for by someone they don't particularly like? And how would they respond to that? Might there be conflict? Might there be an exchange of words? Or maybe might they be vulnerable if they're not as, capable at the hands of this person who knows that they don't have a good relationship? These are things you have to digest, because these are real life things that happen to the residents in your building, the things they complain about, what most of the grievances are made up of. You need to model what you want to see. You need to answer call bells, pick things up off the floor, stop and say hello to the staff members working, and get to know their names. Maybe you know some people. Do you know all people? Do you know their names? Do you know anything about them? Mentoring and supporting others and really facilitating those leadership kinds of relationships are really important. And if you hold yourself to the highest standard, everybody else will get the message and they'll follow. They'll be watching you. When you make a misstep, you're going to knock down a notch in their minds. So don't let that happen. How do you model? You are preventative, not reactive. You do things before they need to be done. So if you know that Mary Smith is a resident who rings their call bell all the time and incites the staff's, impatience, and they complain about it and say she doesn't belong here, well, then you go and see Mary Smith before she ever rings that bell, just to say hello, see how you're doing, show the staff that maybe if you go before you're requested, you might begin to diminish the needy behavior. Maybe that's what you want to show. How you engage people, how you get to the root causes of the things that are problematic in your environment. Those are all things that you want to show to your staff, all things that you want to mentor to your other team members, your leadership folks. And make sure that the kinds of things that you work on with your broader community are really collaborative, that we talk to people, that we educate people, and that we work together collectively to achieve the things that we want. So we focus on relationships and collaborating and making sure that, we breed that empathy that we need. We need everybody to take an understanding away from the kinds of things that we do, and to really feel that everybody in the environment deserves to be recognized individually. And that includes staff and the people living in your environment and those extended family members and other people that we partner with. But everybody has to be recognized and have a voice. And we all need to be sharing that same vision. And those are the things that we need to get to. So emotional intelligence is where it begins. We start to look at a way to, see our own way of communicating, the way we feel and the things that we think. And if we're more mindful of all of that communication and being effective or not, we might be able to overcome a lot of these challenges and even avoid the conflicts that usually hold organizations up. So emotional intelligence, it's about you. It's about maybe that chemistry that you feel with other people. It's about how you manage the behavior and navigate your own reactions to things in social and business situations so that you can achieve the best results from those interactions. So there are 4 basic kinds of skills that fall into 2 categories of personal or social competence. Personal competence is that self-awareness and self-management of the things that you're trying to express, the way you interact with other people. So for myself, what I've learned in studying this topic is that I need to be better about not showing my expressions on my face. I might not say what I'm thinking, but I might show it. Or I might tisk, something I do almost instinctively without thinking. When I don't agree with you, I tisk. I can't do it loud enough maybe for you to hear it, but people often hear it. It's that clicking sound and people go, what? What did you say? Oh, and then you have to say nothing, or you have to admit that you had something on your mind you didn't want to say, but it causes an emotion in the environment. So I have to learn to stop doing that. I was working with an administrator who rolls her eyes and shrugs her shoulder at every time somebody says something. And I said, people don't know what that means. And she said, well, it just means I'm thinking about it. But that's not what they're seeing. They're seeing that maybe you're being negative. So we have to be aware of how we express ourselves, how we look to other people. I often recommend now that if you have something important to say to a person or to a group, that you practice in front of a mirror and you watch yourself saying it, so you can be aware of and control your facial expressions, your tone of voice, before you come to the actual exchange. That social competence is again about your awareness and your relationship skills. Can you be aware of your emotions in the moment and really see how whatever's going on is pushing those buttons that might, cause you to react in a way you don't want to show? And then how can you be aware of your emotions and how other people are reading you so that you can be successful? Again, you can watch their expressions, you can watch their body language, their tone of voice, even breathing. People might take a deep breath when they don't agree with what you say, turn their head, look away. Paying attention to all of those things is part of that intelligence. And you need both of these things. You need to be, in charge of your intellectual ability as well as your emotional abilities. And then the two together are going to form that holistic approach to being successful in your life. So the things we want to be aware of is that self-management and awareness, the social awareness and relationship management. These are the things you should be talking about. And maybe if your leadership team can keep a thick enough skin, you'll begin looking at how these things play out in your own team. Maybe you can get to the root cause of some things by saying, and maybe, owning it and saying, gosh, I didn't realize until today that I do this. And maybe you see it as this, but I don't mean it that way. Even if we can just open up discussion and clear the air of things that might be misunderstood. And I'm guilty of that. I've made first impressions, first reactions to people that end up being wrong. They didn't mean it. That wasn't what they were thinking. I interpreted it by adding my own, twist on it. So be smarter about the things that you do. Know that you can control those impulsive things. You don't have to just blurt out whatever you say. Perhaps if you had dementia and all of your social filters were gone, I would expect you to do that, but you are in control of what you say. You can recognize how you are saying it and the kinds of things that you're thinking, but have that filter that allows you only to, be confident in what you're going to say and to show your best and not to be vulnerable and not to be insecure about what you're saying. Do have empathy for the other people that you're, interacting with. Understand where they're coming from. A staff member comes to you late again. Don't be just immediately angry. Didn't I tell you? I told you the last time. Don't do that. Just say, what's going on? You need to give people the opportunity to live their life, but also see how that life impacts on their work life and recognize the dynamics there. Don't always jump to conclusions and know how to manage those relationships so that you can get past the challenges without, leaving any other kinds of things in the dust. You don't want to leave grudges. You don't want to have a negative kind of emotion between you and the people you work with or for. So you've got to resolve those things, and that requires talking about it. So emotional perception, reading body language, listening to the emotion of things, being able to manage those emotions and to filter them in a way that shows your understanding, your empathy for what people are going through. It's important to teach these skills, to practice them, and to make sure that that's part of your branding, that we have this emotional intelligence and we practice it every day in the way that we lead. So if you are emotionally intelligent, you get along well with people, there are so many things about your integrity and about the way you carry yourself that, have people wanting to follow you. They see that, you have a good way of dealing with people, that you have a good way of accomplishing the things that are important. And so they want to be, someone who shadows those same things. Now, the things that we need to talk about in terms of managing people and really getting to a point where we brand our management style is really about collaboration and looking at the performance and the accountability for the development of our staff, for the development of our systems and the way that we go about monitoring and improving the things that we do. So if you really want to transform your workplace and apply those intellectual and emotional things that we've been talking about, those good skills for transformational leadership, then you need to start with your managers, especially your middle managers, making sure that people have the skills and the tools and the understanding they need to really be able to develop that team spirit, to be able to get people to collaborate and commit to the common goals, and to do so in a way that is true to the branding that you hope to accomplish. As we become a more corporate industry and more organizations are blending, communities and so on, we have to recognize how important it is now to have a brand that is well defined and that people really can identify with. So role and relationship orientation is one of the most important aspects of coaching. We want to make sure that we understand the distinct kinds of things that we want to see in other people, what their on-the-job responsibilities are, but also be able to balance those kinds of things, to be emotional enough to be able to understand how other people are feeling and see how that relates to their commitment to their work. And also just, making people more thoughtful about the way they go about their commitments and the way they manifest those kinds of things. So commitments require that there be some sort of exchange, this, reciprocal kind of relationship where I invest time and energy and thoughts and those kinds of positive things, and I get something back for that. So we were talking just before we started this conversation about how everybody thinks things like Employee of the Month, are satisfying enough for people. But really, in most places that I've spoken to about this, Employee of the Month is not something people really value. They think that everyone, works hard enough to be Employee of the Month. So maybe we have to look for another type of, reciprocal sort of gesture. What else do people value? What are the things that they're really looking for? And that's something that we have to explore in today's environment. What is the commitment, and, how much does what we reciprocate affect the intensity of that? I know of one environment now that's going through some human resource issues, and staff are feeling as though they're not getting enough for their commitment. So we have to look at all of those things and really talk about the kinds of changes in the global economy, the things that are impacting today's workforce, and to look at what employee engagement is really about, what it requires from us. So important that we begin to look at some of these things that can help us along the way. So like connecting, these very quick connects that are part of a coaching kind of approach to management, looking at checking in with people, asking questions, and seeing if you're on the same page about what we're trying to accomplish in their realm of responsibility. Asking them, what was your biggest accomplishment since I saw you last week or the other day? What are you pleased with, and what are you looking forward to accomplishing? Is there something else? Are we on the same page with the kinds of things that we expect out of your position, out of your commitment to the organization? Giving people a chance to, avail themselves of your assistance, asking them if they need help. And the people who continually tell you that they don't they don't really need your help, that they're okay, then that gives you, some foundation for their accountability when it comes to time to really assess how well they've reached their goals or contributed to the goals of the team. So check-in meetings help you to keep, current on things. They help you to reinforce people's, commitments to their team objectives, and making sure that when you do these kinds of things, you let people know that these are all about giving them the tools and the resources to accomplish the things that you all hope to move forward. So the benefits of doing these check-ins really helps employees to be more confident and to know that they're getting the feedback that helps them move forward. Managers can more easily direct the projects and oversee what's going on, and get in there before things begin to fester or, escalate out of control. And you can then adapt your whole organization to the kinds of things that might be happening within those projects that might ordinarily be challenges, but we don't let them get there. And I would recommend to you that anytime you begin a new project, you immediately take it to a quality assurance process, that you sit down and you create a QAPI, overview of what you're trying to accomplish, and you follow it. And if you're only doing your quality assurance meetings quarterly because it's the minimum standard, you really need to step it up to monthly, and to even have interim discussions when things occur, so that you don't end up with just this, perfunctory kind of meeting every 3 months where we really don't talk about anything that needs to be repaired, and we don't do any root cause analysis about why things keep recurring in the environment. So use your QA appropriately, especially in human resources. Do exit interviews. Why are people leaving? Or even with employees that come and they accept a job, but perhaps they only stay briefly. What happened? Why didn't you, maintain that position? So check-ins are things that, really help us to get involved in people's work lives, helping us to understand what the employees' goals are and their priorities, and then being able to have higher accountability. If you're constantly talking to people and you show your management style as being involved and interested and with an ear to what the people have to say, you're going to progress. Your team is going to progress, and you'll be so much more successful. So what we're really aiming for here is developmental coaching, where people want to, follow you because they believe in what you believe in. We don't want to just condition them to not do something because they'll get in trouble. We want them to do things because they see it proactively as a good thing, as a way of, being part of what everybody's doing. And, of late, I've said to people, we really should be inspiring people to want to learn. as opposed to telling them they have to learn or they need to learn. They have to want to in order to really, move forward. So developmental coaching, it's not conditioning. It's really about changing the way people think. And isn't that culture change in the truest sense of the word, is thinking differently about everything we do every day for the people that we're there to care for and the people that we work with, thinking differently. So develop your environment, develop your culture to be an open and interested environment where we really take stock of the people that live and work with us and what they need. And then when we look at progress, when we look at performance kinds of things, don't just do the annual check, 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 everything is okay, or don't overlook those interim disciplinary or performance ratings that come as a result of some episode occurring. Even positive things. There's no reason why you have to wait a year to tell somebody they did a good job. So those are ways of setting benchmarks and not going from 0 to 100 in one fell swoop. We can take our time. So maybe a check-in once a quarter, see how we're doing, or after an event, or maybe I was out on a personal leave and I'm just coming back. Maybe a review of where I was when I left and helping me to get back to that. So charismatic leaders are important in an environment. They really bring a certain kind of personality to the work. If your staff like you, if they respect you, if they value what you bring to the environment, they're going to want to follow you. Years ago, as a young director in a therapeutic activity department, my owner told me I could hire as many people as I wanted, but I could only pay the minimum wage and no benefits. So he told me I could hire as many as I wanted. So I did. I hired 27 people. I hired a lot of college students, and I said to them, I can't really pay you what you're worth, but I can teach you. And that's what I did. And so many of them went on to stay in healthcare and to become licensed or certified professionals today. So I want to think that openness, that willingness to demonstrate, to model, to show, to teach, were things that not only made me a better manager, but helped the people to see that, there was a way to progress in the field that they had chosen and that they could move up the ladder by maybe adopting some of these same ways of, behaving and modeling for other people. So, if your team is dysfunctional, it starts with the relationships. What kind of a first impression do you make for new people? Do we shun them? Are we wary of them? Do we welcome them with open arms and invite them to lunch the first day? What kind of an impression? Are we functional or dysfunctional? Do you work with anybody you don't like? Because if you do, everyone knows it. And it makes an impact on the ambiance of your environment. So we need to look at ways of fostering better relationships. And why teams are so dysfunctional? Well, first of all, we don't trust each other. We don't really, feel that we can be safe in talking or, trusting our partners. So we've got to get to that. We've got to get to a point where people can ask for help and not feel vulnerable, that we won't feel it's uncomfortable to express a weakness or a misunderstanding or those kinds of things, that, we want to be able to rely on each other for the kinds of things that we need. We also want to come together in a way that is, conciliatory. We like each other. We don't mind being together, working together, spending time, but a lot of times we're forced to be together. And that way, it's always not the right mix, or we feel uncomfortable, or maybe we just don't understand why we're together and it's causing more stress. So talk is important. And so if we're hearing people talk about each other, let's go to positive gossip. Rumor mills and gossip can be so toxic, excuse me. So we don't want to let those kind of things fester. And a terminology of positive gossip is something I saw, excuse me, sorry. Okay, positive gossip is something I saw just recently that I think puts an idea in our head that is really practical. So you also have to get, past this idea of not having conflict. Conflict often breeds creativity. Excuse me, we have to come to a place where we can collaborate, meet halfway, accommodate each other. So without conflict, we're not going to ever get there. So I think that conflict can be inspiring. And if we can get to the point of why we have these conflicts, if we can get past these kinds of things, and they give us this an example here of someone who is, seemingly overprotective and neurotic as a mother, but it turns out that, there had been a death in her family of another child. So now we say, oh, now we get it. So in the same way, excuse me, do we understand why we are feeling or reacting to each other in the way that we are? And if we don't know, can we talk about it? Can we get to a point where we understand that we might have differences, that we might come from different backgrounds or different cultures, if you will, but that, excuse me, so that we can still find those commonalities that bring us together. And it's so important for us to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, to be able to look at those vulnerabilities and make, sure that we understand that we're different people, but that we can come together as a group and overcome some of those, preconceptions or those biases that we might have had. I like this idea from Best Buy about following in on a results-only work environment. Not that your staff is, going to be able to work so much remotely, but just this idea that you focus in on what you're really, needing to accomplish, and clear away all of the, the other stuff that sort of, interferes with our perspective on things. There's always a lot of baggage to office politics. So can you get through all of those things and move on? Can you help us to know each other better? Can we get out of the office and learn a little bit more about who we are as people? What we love, the kinds of things that we value, what constitutes quality of life in our minds, and can we find oh my goodness, can we find some better communication in shared experiences, things that are fun? Years ago we would do family days and maybe baseball, teams and things of that nature to bring people together beyond their jobs. And those are important things to begin thinking about. Finding a way to talk about things. If you can't overcome a problem, maybe you need a third party who's going to be objective, who can mediate that discussion for you. But to let it fester really just creates a blot on your whole culture. Like I said, if you don't get along with people, everybody knows it and they feel it. If you walk in on two people who are arguing and they stop because you walked in, you can feel that they want you to get out of there as fast as you can, because they're going to start arguing again as soon as you leave. So we really need to encourage our teams to talk, to welcome feedback, and to have a thicker skin. So it really comes down to being committed to the organizations, to show that commitment, not just talk about it. How we create an environment of care, the way that we interact with each other, and the way that we show our commitment to our responsibilities are all important to making sure the team is going to move forward. Everyone needs to be accountable. If it's your job to do it, we need to do it. It's everybody's job to care for residents. We shouldn't be hearing, oh, she's not mine, he's not mine, or it's not my job, it's their job. It's everybody's job to create the right environment, to be true to our brand, to our mission and our vision and the goals that we want to accomplish. If we're not attentive to those results, what begins to happen? Things begin to fall apart, and that's how people like me work. We come in, we help you set up a system as a consultant, we put everything in place, but then, there's no attention to the results, it all falls apart, and then you have to call me again. So as much as I like working, I'd rather that you find a way to really sustain the hard work that you do. And that's what your quality assurance program can do for you. So transforming your environment really means that you appeal to a higher set of values, that you demonstrate that, and that you show everyone that we share a responsibility for making this a better place, for giving people what they came for in terms of care and service. And we're going to inspire people. The more you foster that kind of inspiration, the more you foster these relationships between people, the more you will foster ongoing transformative change. You need to be fluid. Like I said, if there's too much longevity, we stand still and become stagnant. We need to keep moving, keep bringing new people in, defining our success. What does it look like? Do you know how you're going to get to your goals? How are you going to overcome your challenges and succeed in doing the things you want to do? If you want to be really true to that 5-star rating, you and I both know that there's a lot that goes behind that if we're really true to what those ratings mean. So what does it look like? Can you describe it to me? Can you show me in a tangible way? Some of the things we need to overcome, making sure the people who hold the purse strings understand the perspective of the hands-on caregiver. Why do we want the things we're asking for? Train your managers, especially middle managers. They're a very vital part of the communication from the people at the top to the people at the front lines. And sometimes when that middle management is blurred in the way they communicate, we have a lot of problems. Make sure education and training is in place. Make sure people are accountable and that we have good communication and that we respect each other and that we show that respect. Develop an ongoing dialogue. What is it like to be the other guy? Do we know what it's like to really live in the environment? Do we understand how hard it is to accept this placement, to accept the circumstances that we're in? And do we anticipate that we're not going to be so happy about it, that we might develop an attitude because we no longer have what we want or need? These are all important things. We talked initially about the trauma of the pandemic and what it's done to us, making sure that we create a healthy workplace, making sure we look at those risk factors, working too much, not having what we need, not getting the right information, and make sure that we address mental health problems wherever they come from, whether it's something, innate to the person and something that's happening to them individually, or something that's permeating the whole environment, stuff like as the stress and the grief of the pandemic and the things that we're trying to overcome. Make sure that we're committed as a team, that you talk about the fact that we should be empathetic toward each other. If I need to go on break first, you can read it on my face, then give me the autonomy to make that switch without having to go and ask permission and make it a big, long, drawn-out process. You will foster people being more concerned about each other. And it is time to be our brother and sister's keeper. We need that emotionally. Learn how to laugh, make sure that people know it's okay to seek humor in the day, to be lighthearted, and not to take everything so seriously. We've gotten very focused, very serious during COVID. It's time to, get back to being a little lighthearted, helping people to feel that way. And making sure people know how much we appreciate what they do. Yourselves, even your coworkers at your level, whatever that is, thank them. Thank them for the hard work they do, just like I appreciate what you do every day. You do jobs that a lot of people would never do. You spend time with people others would shun. So I do appreciate the work that you do. And I certainly appreciate the fact that, you can be the most observant person in your environment, the best leader in your environment for modeling the way we should be looking at each other, paying attention to the way people are acting, the way that they're moving or the way that they're engaging or not with other people. Making sure that we're proactive about mental health and that we don't take chances in a world where we're seeing so much more violence in response to the things that people have suffered in the wake of the pandemic, and maybe beyond that, but we are seeing a much more lively expression of violence all around us. So we need to be aware of that in our small microcosm as well, and watch body language, pay attention to people's moods and behavior. So I've given you a number of resources here so that you can arm yourself with all kinds of information, all free, all helpful. And in shaping education for your staff, there's lots of good educational material here that you can take and claim for your own in-service department and make sure that people are always current in the things that they understand. You may not have dealt with some of these things yet, you may not deal with them ever, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't know about it and how it plays into our work as long-term care providers. So again, I thank you so much for your time today. I know it's important to take, time away. It's hard to take time away from the day-to-day responsibilities, but I hope the conversation has been valuable to you. Again, if you have any questions or thoughts or you want additional resources, I'm happy to share with you if you just simply let me know, or if you want to let Kimberly know if there are things that you would like to have, I can certainly send them off to her and she can put them out to everybody who's on the call today. So I'm going to turn this back over now to Kimberly, see if we have any questions or comments. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me. Kimberly?
Hi, at this time I want to open things up for Q&A. I don't see any questions currently in that channel, but just want to ask if anyone does have any questions that they submit them at this time. Silence can be deadly.
You see one comment that just came in. No questions. Thank you, William.
Well, thank you again, Barbara, for sharing this important information today. And thank you all for joining us on today's webinar. If you do happen to have any questions at a later time, feel free to email Barbara or myself. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks so much. Take care now.